Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi is Zevachim Tav Samach Vav and Zevachim 66, and we're going to start on the bottom of Samachayim Vav. Samachayim Vav, 4 lines from the bottom. The Gemara tells us, Amru Rabbanan Kamei Rabbi Yirmiyah. So the Rabbanan said in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Lo Shmiel Hada Amar B'Shem Ben Yakim. Then you hear the teaching of Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim, Shimon ben Elazar ben Padaz, Shimon ben Elazar ben Shemua, and Omar Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon Shemati b'chatas of Shemabdilin. That even though it says in the Torah about the chatas of, it says lo yavdil by a carbon ola sa'of, when it's a bird offering of an ola, there's a concept that you have to do havdalah. What's havdalah? So Rashi says it means you need to cut through both of the simanim, both the kana and the vesha, the trach and the esophagus, or else it's not going to be a kosher carbon. But by the chatos, it says lo yavdil, and you're not supposed to do that. So that's what the Rabbanan say, that if you do havdalah by a chatos, it's no good. But comes along Rabbi Shimon, and he says, I heard by the chatos of shem avdilin, and indeed you do have to make this. That you do make this havdalah, but no. What does it mean, mavdilin? It doesn't mean that you have to do the havdalah. It means my will you havdil. What does it mean when it says in Torah that you can't do the havdalah? Ain't tzarich havdalah. It means you're not required to do havdalah. So Rabbi Shimon is saying that by chatas oath, even though it says you can't do havdalah, it means that you're not required to do havdalah. But if you do it, it's not going to be disqualified. So I'm like Rav Acha the Rebbe Rav Ashi. What are you talking? Do you mean to say al me'ata gabay bor? What about a pit in the Torah? That dichsiv lo yechasenu, if a person digs a hole and he doesn't cover it up, then he's responsible. Hochinami, do you think that the pasuk there means they ain't tzarich chatzos? You think the pasuk there just means that you're not required to cover it? Of course, it doesn't mean that you're not required to cover it. The day in tzarich chatzos, you think the pasuk just means that you're not required to cover it? Of course, you're ideally supposed to cover it. So Gemara says, no, they're not the same thing. Hachi hashta. Not the same thing. Hasam, by the case of the pit, even since it says the owner of the pit, since it says by the pit, it says the owner of the pit must pay. So therefore, we're going to say that he has a responsibility to cover his pit, because if he won't do that, why would he be responsible to pay? We see from here that when it comes to a tort, it's not just that you have to pay if you do it, but it's your responsibility to do it. It's if you don't do it, if you don't cover, you're in violation of a prohibition. But in our case here, since the Torah says about the olasof, he should bring it. The Torah already drew the distinction between the chatas and the olah. So so why does it have to say don't separate it by the chatas? So it just means that you're not required to separate. But if you separate it, it's not going to be disqualifying, according to Rabbi Elazar or Rabbi Shimon. Mitzvah damaguf. It says in the Mishnah that you have to do the mitzvah, that you have to squeeze out the blood from the body, and if you didn't, of the bird. And if you didn't do that, it's not kosher. Tana Rabbanan ola afal pisha mitzvah damaguf or mitzvah damaroch. So when it says in the Torah about chatas ha'of and ola sa'of, it says ola, even though he just did the squeezing of the body and not the squeezing of the head, it's okay. Yachol mitzvah damarosh or mitzvah damaguf. I might think that if he squeezes out the blood of the head and not the body, it's also okay. Tamomer, who? No, it's limiting. It has to be done properly. I'm not meaning to say that it's no good if you just squeeze out the blood of the head and not the body. So my Talmuda. So what's the teaching that gets us to that reading? Ravina mistabra. It's more logical to assume the rov damim beguf shlichi. It's more logical to assume that the majority of the blood is found in the body, and so therefore the assumption is that if you don't squeeze out the blood from the body, it's not going to be acceptable. You have to squeeze out the blood from the body of the bird, or else it's not going to be acceptable. So now, and now we start the next chapter, which really is a continuation of the theme of the first chapter, and says the theme of this seventh chapter is what this chapter ended with. So we're talking about the two birds, the chatas and the olah. The chatas, you can't not you're not allowed to make with the characteristics of the olah. The chatas is supposed to be done below the chut hasukra, below the red line. The chatas you're supposed to do hazah, sprinkle the blood. Chatas, according to the Tanakhama, you're not supposed to do malika on both simanim, and the chatas is eaten, whereas the olah is not eaten. So chatas ha'ov sha'asa lamata. Let's say you did it below the chut hasukra, and you do it k'maaseh chatas. You did it following all the laws of the chatas. Rashi says malika b'siman echad. You did a malika, and then you did a hazah, and then you did the sprinkling of the blood from the bird umitzoy, and then you did the squeezing. If you did it l'shem chatas, the chatas has to be done with the right intent for the purpose of the chatas. Then it's kshera. Then it's going to be okay. Then it's kosher. But k'maaseh chatas. But if you did it like the purpose of a chatas, but you meaning to say you did all the actions of a chatas, but you did it l'shem olah, but you did it for the wrong intent. You did it for an olah, or k'maaseh olah l'shem chatas, or if you did the actions of an olah, but you did it for the purpose of a chatas, or k'maaseh olah l'shem olah, or you did the chatas, but you did it like the olah for the purpose of an olah. In all these cases, psula. It's going to be disqualified because it has, you have to do all the actions right, and you have to do it for the right intent. But let's say you did it also a mawa kamaseku, and let's say you did it above, you did one of these things above, then any one of these things above, it's going to be pasul, and the Gemara is going to have to discuss what that is. Let's say you did an olah sa'of, which is supposed to be done above, and you did it k'maaseh olah, like the actions of the olah. So in all these cases, l'shem olah k'shera. If you do it like any of these actions of the olah for the purpose of an olah, it's kosher. K'maaseh olah l'shem chatas. If you do it like the purpose of an olah, if you do the actions of the olah, but you do it for the purpose of a chatas, then it's going to be k'shera. Bavacho also a bala, but the owner has not fulfilled his obligations. K'maaseh chatas l'shem olah. Let's do the actions of the chatas for the purpose of an olah, or k'maaseh chatas l'shem chatas, for the purpose of the action of the chatas for the purpose of a chatas, but it was an olah psua, it's disqualified. Also, amaita k'maaseh, and if you did all these actions below, like any of these actions, we did it below the chut hasikra. And even if you did it like the actions of an olah for the purpose of an olah, but it was below the chut hasukra, it's going to be disqualified. So it says the Gemara on the top of Samach Vav Amud Beis. So what is the context of our Gemara, of our Mishnah? That's what the Gemara's initial question is. Tishani b'mai. As Rashi says, we're talking about that if you do an olah, you do the actions of an olah for the purpose of a chatas. Meaning to say, Rashi says to me, by the way, the Gemara's question is, davar b'chatas asa k'maaseh olah. Which one of the things of the chatas is it that he did like the actions of an olah? Meaning to say, what did he do wrong? Which one of his actions did he do wrong? If you want to say that he did on the chatas, the actions of a malika, meaning he did a havdalah, according to Rashi, cut through both of the simanim of the oath. Is that what he did wrong? Well, if that's the case, name of the local Rebbe Elazar bar Reb Shimon, then we have to say that our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Elazar bar Reb Shimon, because remember we start off our daf by saying Rebbe Elazar bar Reb Shimon says it doesn't disqualify if you do the malika of an olah on a chatas of an oath. Because he said you're allowed to do it. Rebbe Elazar bar Reb Shimon says you're allowed to do the havdalah on the chatas oath. So the Gemara says v'lo kimna the local Rebbe Elazar bar Reb Shimon. But didn't we already establish in the previous Mishnah that it was not like Rebbe Elazar bar Shimon? So what's the big deal to say that this Mishnah is also not like Rebbe Elazar bar Shimon? And Gemara says, yeah, but we even though that's possible to say that, but we don't want to be forced into saying that because we'd rather say that the Mishnah agrees with everyone. The Gemara says, well, no, we don't have to say. It could even go according to Rebbe Elazar bar Shimon. Why? Say it would have been so easy to say that our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Elazar bar Shimon, but the Gemara doesn't want to do that. The Gemara doesn't want to rush into excluding people. So the Gemara says, no, we can even say that this Mishnah is like Rebbe Elazar bar Shimon. How so? The Shani Ba'azah, that what he did was, the Chatas, if you were supposed to do Azah, and he didn't do the Azah. So, he went straight to the squeezing of the blood. The squeezing is the avodah of the oil. He just skipped it. He did the malika, and he went straight to the mitzvah, and he didn't do the hazah. So that's like an olah. So, and therefore it's going to be disqualified. And it's also logical to assume it's mistaber that when it says in our Mishnah that he did a shinoi, that it's talking about hazah. Why? Why is that logical? Because the fact that the next clause of the Mishnah, good morning, welcome, Jeff, Baruch Hashem. So the next clause of the Mishnah states, also amala kamasa kulan psua. That if he went to the top of the altar and he did any of these actions of the also amala kamasa mikulan, from any of these things, meaning to say whether he did like the oah for the oah or the oah for the chatas or the chatas for the oah or even the chatas for the chatas, since he had done it above and the chatas off is supposed to be below, it's going to be disqualified. We're in Samach Vav Amud Beis 66b, around 6 lines from the top. So the Gemara says, so it says also mal kamase kuam psua vafilu kamase chatas l'shem chatas, and even if he did, that's what our Mishnah said, even if he did like the chatas for the purpose of the chatas. So the Gemara, so if he changed it, if he did the chatas like the oah above, then it's going to be disqualified. So the question is, what did he do above that was the chatas like the oah, the shani b'mai? What did he do above? Anyway, he's been disqualified. But if he did anything that he changed from the chatas to the oah, it's also disqualified. So the question is, what did he do that would have made it disqualified? If you want to say that he did the malika above, if you want to say that he did the malika above when he was supposed to do the malika below, no, that can't be the case, because Amar Mar malika b'kol makom, the malika b'kol makom b'mizbeach kshera, because we know that the malika, even of the chatas, could be done anywhere in the altar. And alav the shani b'hazah must be that he didn't do the hazah. That's what it means. He didn't do the hazah, and so therefore he skipped the sprinkling, and so therefore it's like Rebbe Lezer. So therefore we're going to say that it could even be like Rebbe Lezer or Rebbe Shimon, because the distinction is not that he did havdalah, but that he didn't do the hazah. And that since the second clause of the Mishnah is talking about where he didn't do hazah, also the first clause of the Mishnah can be talking about where he didn't do hazah, and so therefore we're not forced to say that our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Lezer or Rebbe Shimon. Where it says no, midi area, no, not necessarily. Hakadisa. It's possible the first clause is talking about a case where he did havdalah, where he did havdalah on the chatas oath, and it's not like Rebbe Lezer or Rebbe Shimon. In the second case, it's talking about where he didn't do the hazah. Okay, now we get into the next piece. It said in our Mishnah that the olas oath that he made a change in it and he did it like the chatas is going to be disqualified. So the Gemara wants to know, what's the disqualifying act that he did on the olas oath? Again, what does the olas oath require? Olas oath is required to be above the chutas sikra. You sprinkle olas oath. You do the malika on both simanim. You have to do havdalah. It's supposed to be above, and there's no hazah. There's no sprinkling. It's just the squeezing out of the blood against the altar. So the shani b'mai. So the Gemara wants to know, what did he do? It said that he did the olas oath like the chatas. How if it's disqualified? How? You aim at the shani b'malika. If you want to say that he didn't do the malika, that he did only one siman and not both simanim. He didn't do. If you want to say that he didn't do the two simanim like he's supposed to do, like he did it only like a chatas, midiktani, and the fact that it says b'seifa, and now that's the next Mishnah, that's on the bottom of our page, and the fact that it says in the seifa, kulan e metamen bebeisa blia umolin bahen. Okay, let's stop for a second here. What does this mean, kulan e metamen bebeisa blia? Then normally, if there's a carcass animal of a regular animal, not a bird, that if it's just a carcass, it wasn't slaughtered, it transmits tumah even by touching it or carrying it. But a bird only transmits tumah if it wasn't slaughtered, bebeisa bliyat, but through when it's in your mouth. when you're eating it. So the question is, let's say the malika went wrong. Is that going to be considered like it was? If you slaughter the animal, it's no longer considered a carcass. If you do a shlita, even though the animal might not be kosher, it could still have like a defect in it, so it's not kosher. Nevertheless, if you do the shlita, it's no longer considered a nevela. Question is, if you do malika, and then the animal's still not acceptable because you did something wrong with the carbon, is it motzia midei nevela? Is it still going to be considered a nevela, or is it mitame bebeisa bli or not? If you did the malika, but the carbon was no good. So we said in the next clause in the Mishnah, all the chatas and the os that are mentioned in our Mishnah in these different cases where you did it wrong, even though the carbon is not kosher and you didn't do a shlita, you did a malika, we're still going to say they're not going to transmit tumah, because even though the carbon is disqualified, the malika helps that it's not going to be considered like an avela, and so therefore it doesn't transmit tumah. And also mo'alin bahen, that the me'ilah is if you misappropriate temple property. If you do it accidentally, you have to bring a carbon and you pay back the temple. But that only works while it's a temple property. Once it's permitted to the Kohanim, there's no me'ilah. But in this case, since you messed up the malika, it's not permitted for the Kohanim. And so therefore, it's still going to be considered like you're doing me'ilah, because it was never allowed for the Kohanim. So in all these cases where the carbon became disqualified, it's not going to become tamei in the base habliya, and you're mo'alin by him. So do you want to say Nema de Loka Rabbi Yoshua? Do you want to say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yoshua? Our Mishnah that says that a olas oaf that you changed it and you did it like the action of the chatos is disqualified. So if you want to say that you changed in the malika, and yet still nevertheless it's not going to transmit tumah in the base of bliya, but there is me'ilah. You want to say it's not like Rabbi Yoshua, because if you want to say that there's still me'ilah, among those cases is also an olah that you did below, like a chatas. And if our Mishnah is talking about this case where you did only one malika, you did only one siman like the chatas, Amar, didn't Rabbi Yeshua say, and we're going to see this in the next Mishnah, doesn't Rabbi Yeshua say that if you did one malika, if you did the olah like the chatas, ein molin, there's no longer me'ilah, because now it became a chatas and the kohanim are able to eat from it. So therefore it doesn't make sense to say that we're talking about the malika here, because if it was the malika, Rabbi Yeshua would say that there is no longer me'ilah there, and our Mishnah said molin bahan. So what's the way in which the olah changed? That you didn't do that he sprinkled it. What does it mean, b'mitzah? It means he sprinkled it like the chatas, and he didn't go straight to the squeezing like the olah, and that's the change. So hema seva, but the next clause in the Mishnah states, olah sa'ov she'asa lamata kamata chatas l'shem chatas. So let's say there was an olah sa'ov. You bought the animal as an olah, and then you went and everything that would happen to this bird was like a chatas, and you did it below for the purpose of a chatas. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Molin, but Rabbi Eliezer says, well, since it was like a chatas, that it was supposed to be an olah, therefore it never has a shas heter or kohanim, so therefore there's me'ilah on it. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua says a molin ba. Rabbi Yeshua says no. In that circumstance, since you did the olah exactly like the chatas, it was permitted. It had a shas heter for the kohanim, and so therefore there's no longer me'ilah. Tishani b'mai, what did you do wrong there? If you want to say that you did a hazah on it, the Amar Rabbi Yoshua, Amar the Amar Rabbi Yoshua, would Rabbi Yoshua really say there that if you did the hazah on the chatas ha'of, that you're going to get hazah on the olas ha'of, that you're going to get me'ilah afterwards? Rabbi Yeshua says his law that the olah becomes a chatas, the shani b'malika, where he changed with respect to the killing of it, where he did one siman instead of two. But b'mitzoi mi amar, does he also say this by the squeezing of the blood out of the animal, where you just went to the sprinkling like a chatas and not straight to the squeezing like the olah? Ella must be b'malika. Must be that he changed it with malika. So the Gemara says reisha. So does this really make sense? That reisha v'seifa b'malika. We just established above that the first clause is talking about malika, that you did malika above. by the chatas of, and you did the malika like the ola, and the seifa is also talking about a malika, and mitzias, and the middle case is mitzoy. Is that what we want to say? That's not ideal. The Lord says in, yeah, that's what we have to say. Reisha v'seifa b'malika u'mitzias b'mitzoy, and that's what you have to say. So now we come up to the next Mishnah. So this is what we're discussing. And this Mishnah is almost like a Gemara, you'll see. Kulan aim etamim beis abuya. If you make any of these changes to the all the chatos and the os of the birds that you messed up and you didn't do them properly, nevertheless, we're going to say aim etamim beis abuya. Even if you did the bird offering improperly, it's still no longer going to be considered a nevela, because you did a malika on it, which vis-a-vis the carbon is like a shlita. So therefore, it no longer transmits tama. But at the same time, we're going to say they never really had a shas heter for the Kohanim. The Kohanim were never able to beat them. So since they became disqualified, you're still going to, if you use them, you're committing me'ilah, because they're still the temple property. Chutz, with the exception of michatas of she'asa lamata kamas achatas shem chatas, except if you did it properly, except if you have a chatas of that you did below, like all the actions of a chatas, well, that's kosher. So therefore, it's no longer me'ilah. Why is it no longer me'ilah? Because unlike the ola, which always remains me'ilah, because the ola is always eaten by the mizbeach only, the chatas of, once you do everything properly, then it becomes able to be eaten by the Kohanim. The Kohanim eat the flesh of the bird. So therefore, if you do the chatas properly, there's no longer me'ilah on it. And so therefore it's no longer me'ilah, and obviously it's also no tumah in the base of bliya. So now the Gemara says, let's say another law. In addition, let's talk about an ola that you did like a chatas. An ola sa'of she'asa lamata kamas chatas. Let's say you do the ola sa'of, but you do it below. The ola sa'of is supposed to be above, and you do like the chatas, and you do it for the purpose of a chatas. So Rabbi Eliezer says there, Molenba. Rabbi Eliezer says it remains an ola, and so therefore, even though you apply the blood, it still remains an ola, and so therefore you can't eat from it, and it never was allowed by the Kohanim. So therefore, we're going to say there's still me'ilah attached to it. So Rabbi Yeshua says ein molenba. Rabbi Yeshua says there's no me'ilah in that case. Meaning, if you did an ola below exactly like the chatas, there's no me'ilah. Rashi says the kivan deshina shma u'maaseh u'mekoma. He changed the name. He said, I'm doing it for the purpose of a chatas, and he changed the actions, and he changed the place. He did it below. So nas is chatas. So he turned the ola into a chatas, and so since he turned the ola into the chatas, once you did it, it has like a shas heter for kohanim. And so therefore, you can no longer have me'ilah on it. That's Rashi saying the position of the Gemara at the end. But at this point, the Mishnah is actually assuming that there's a different reason. That the reason why Rabbi Shua says there's no me'ilah is because there's no me'ilah on a carbon when you change the carbon to something that has no me'ilah, and the ola has no me'ilah. Excuse me, and I'm meaning to say when you change the carbon to something that there's no me'ilah, and that's a puzzle carbon. So we'll see the discussion here. I'm a Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara brings this discussion between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, where Rabbi Eliezer wants to prove that in this case, if you do an ola like a chatas, you could still have me'ilah. Rabbi Yeshua says there's no me'ilah. So I'm a Rabbi Eliezer. Umayim chatas, just like a chatas, she'ein molen ba lishma, that if you do, so Rabbi Eliezer, who says that there's still me'ilah here, he says, what about the chatas? That if you do the chatas lishma, then there's no longer me'ilah, because now we're going to say under these circumstances, it's able to be eaten by the Kohen. Kishashina eshma, but if you do the chatas for the purpose of the ola, molenba, then because it's disqualified, and the Kohanim can't eat it, there is mi'ila. Ola shemo and boashma, and ola, where if you do it for the right purposes, there's still mi'ila. Kishashina eshma, when you change its purpose and do it for chatas, ain't din sheyimalba. For sure, there's mi'ila. So Amar Rabbi Yeshua says no. Im amarta bechatas. What's the reason why if you do the chatas for the purpose of the ola? And it's mi'ila, sheshina eshma Hashem ola, shekein shina eshma davar sheish bo mi'ila, because the chatas transformed into the ola, and the ola there is mi'ila once it's brought. Tomar ba'ola, but you're not going to say there's mi'ila by the ola. Shina eshma Hashem chatas. You change it for the purpose of the chatas. Shekein shina eshma davar shein bo mi'ila, but a chatas was brought properly. There's no mi'ila. So don't tell me that there's mi'ila in this case, because the chatas there's no mi'ila. So I'm away Rabbi Eliezer. Very koche kochim sheshachtam bedarom v'shachtam Hashem kochim kalim yochichu. So Rabbi Eliezer says, what about koche kochim? Let's say like an ola or a chatas, and you have to slaughter them in the north. If you slaughter them in the south and you disqualify them, sheshachtam bedarom, you slaughtered them in the south, and there where they became disqualified. V'shachtam Hashem koche kalim, and you slaughter them for the purpose of the koche kalim yochichu. It'll prove this case that olas oath that you did below, there's still me'ilah. Shekain shina shemam. You did them for the wrong purpose. You changed their actions to kachikalam. With davar she'ein bo me'ilah. There's no me'ilah on kachikalam after they're slaughtered. Oh, the umolim ban, and therefore in this case, nevertheless we say that since you slaughtered those kachim kalam in the south. There is mi'ila. So therefore, say the same law by the ola. Even though you change its name to an chatas, and typically speaking, there's no mi'ila on the chatas once it's slaughtered properly. But there should be mi'ila. I'm a Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua responds, "Lo, if you're going to say by kachikachim that you slaughtered in the south for the purpose of kachikolim, that there's mi'ila there, shekin shinesh mamu davar sheish bo iser v'heter. You changed its name to something that there's iser v'heter. What does that mean? That means that the kachim kalim, they still have the murim that are brought on the altar, and there's the iser mi'ila on the imurim, and whereas the meat is permitted. Tomar ba'ola sheshina shmo davar shekua heter, but the ola you change it to a chatas, and the chatas ha'of, no part of it goes up on the altar. There's no imurim that are burned, and so therefore, in that case, we're going to say there's no me'ilah there anymore, says Rabbi Yeshua. So the debate continues in the Gemara, but we'll stop here for today's daf. Yashakoach.